Be-
Yes, yeah. So I'm one, I'm three, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. That's also fine. That's fine. And then just let me know. Right, good? Hello everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for coming today, and thank you to Felicia and Pittsburgh Black Pride for reaching out to the library and wanting to do this event with us. We love working with you guys, so we're really excited about this. Thank you to all of our other orgs who were able to come out to us today, whether you're on this little panel or if you're tabling, we really appreciate it. This is an event that we're super excited about, so excited to kick it off. We will go ahead and just get started. I'm gonna introduce first Laura Nevitt from the Keystone Progress Education Fund.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Laura Nevitt. I'm the Executive Director of Keystone Progress Education Fund. We are a 501c3 that does civic engagement work on many different fronts. Primarily, a lot of our work right now is focused on making sure folks in the disability community are civically engaged and registered to vote and participating in the process. Did you want me to answer my question first, or at least do intros?
If I was gonna do like little intros for each of you, like as we go through, if you think it's better to do intros, that's totally fine. I think if you just wanna go with your question, that's okay.
Yeah. So my topic today is voting important, and does my vote count? I will unequivocally say yes to both of those things, and I'll talk a little bit about why. We often get this when we're out. I come from a campaigning background. I spent 25 years doing political campaigns, and so often talk to people about going to vote, and they always would ask me, why should I go vote? Because they don't feel like their vote matters. All of that. And my response to that is always generally, and it's going to sound a little cheesy, but it matters because you matter. And we have to think about who we're voting for, not the person per se all the time, but the office and what they do. And so why your vote matters is because what we're electing are people to go sit at the table where decisions are made, policy decisions, funding decisions, whatever it may be, that affect our lives directly, impact us. And so I would think that I would want to have a say in who's the person making those decisions, right? So that is kind of my somewhat cheesy, although I think very appropriate response. There are other things you will also often hear folks, your civic duty. Yes, that probably doesn't play as much with newer generation. I grew up with that. My dad, very much it was ingrained. This was our civic responsibility as a person in our community to go do this thing. But I know generationally, like that doesn't really. I don't know that a lot of parents are having that conversation at their home. I can remember growing up. My dad didn't care. We were ideologically on opposite ends of the spectrum when it came to politics. But it was always told to us, you go vote. It didn't matter who you voted for, but you went and cast your ballot. And so, but I know that's, the thing. But when I got into the work of actually trying to help people get elected, it really is, and why I went into that work is policies and decisions are made at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level that impact me directly, you directly, everyone directly, more so at the local level, which I know other folks are going to talk a little bit more about local elections, but that is why it's important. And does it count? Absolutely it counts. Now, sometimes we don't feel like it does because the person we voted for didn't win, right? But it counts for a number of reasons because living in a democracy and a representative democracy is an ongoing participatory thing. It doesn't stop at the ballot box. have to make sure that once we cast our ballot, that we're then holding our elected officials responsible. We're out in our community having conversations. And it is more impactful, and we have someone on the state rep here, and he could probably speak to this a little bit, but it's more impactful for me to call my state rep and say, not only am I a constituent, but I'm a voter. And so they hear that a little bit more than to just be, Joe Schmo make a phone call. So it counts. I can also tell you in close races, I've experienced it. I've been through recounts. I've been through races where somebody won by a single vote, and so that it does count. It often doesn't feel like it does most of the time, which is why this is a struggle for people. But do know that it does count. It is important, and like I said, I would just keep in mind the idea that it's important because you are important and your opinion matters, and that's what I'm going to say about that.
Right, so my name is Fawn Walker Montgomery. I'm the CEO and co-founder for Take Action Advocacy Group and Fawn Walker Montgomery Consulting. Thank you to Pittsburgh Black Pride and Penn Library for having us here today. Just to piggyback off of something Laura said, so I'm a former elected official. I did 2 terms. I don't know why I say I did 2 terms. I don't know why I always say that. It really felt like. Well, I served 2 terms on the Keystone City Council, and the second time I won by 3 votes. So when people tell you every vote counts, literally, when I had woke up it was 9, and they did a recount, and I won by literally just 3 votes. So every vote absolutely counts. So I'm just going to talk today about your rights at the polls, how the county is structured, as well as people's rights who are incarcerated. So in Pennsylvania, our polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now, if it's your first time voting at the poll, you do have to have a form of ID. It can be your driver's license, can be a passport, student ID, employee ID. If you don't have any of those, then you can have a utility bill, a firearm permit, or a known photo ID issued by either the government or the Commonwealth of PA, a paycheck, government check, or a current bank statement. So if you move into a new area and you go to vote for the first time at that poll, they may ask you for your ID. If it's not your first time, they should not ask you for any form of identification. If you go back and forth with people and they say you can't vote there, maybe you didn't, re-register when you moved, not re-register, but file change of address, then you ask for a provisional ballot. And I know there's people in the audience and there's people online too, so I want to make sure that message gets out. If it is your first time voting at that poll, that's the only time that you need identification. And if it's not, and they say you're not on the list, you can always call the Allegheny County Board of Elections to find out, where your polling place is. But if you go back and forth with folks, don't ever leave in that vote. Do a provisional ballot because they do count the provisional ballots. You can also always vote in person. You can always vote by mail. So for this election, which is November 4th, the deadline is October 28th for your application to be in if you want to do a mail ballot. But you have the option to vote in person, or you can vote by mail. And with the vote by mail piece, you can also, if you don't want to wait, you can request an application and do your ballot the same day at the Board of Elections. You just have to go down there to the office. You can do all of that in the same day, or you can just wait. And then there's a box you can check if you just, and I check that if you just want the mail-in ballot every year. That way you kind of remind yourself. So that's just like the voting rights at the polls. Also want to go over how the county is structured. I do this every time I talk about voting because people don't understand how this county is confusingly structured, I'm sure on purpose. So if you live in the city of Pittsburgh, Ed Gainey is your mayor. If you don't live in the city of Pittsburgh, he is not your mayor. I've really had to argue with people about this in the grocery store. Like, that is not our mayor. That is the city of Pittsburgh's mayor. So the way the county is structured, the county executive kind of sits at the top. That is Sarah now, and then the controller, and then there's county council. So I know there's city councils throughout the county, but there's also a county council. And then there's the Court of Common Pleas, and it's the DA at the end. And then the sheriff, and then the treasurer. So that's kind of the structure of the county. And the county has 130 self-governing municipalities. That is the most in the state of Pennsylvania. I think we're like third or fourth behind somewhere, of course, in Florida that has that has a lot of municipalities. So 130 self-governing municipalities. This includes the Pittsburgh city and the Keystone city, 96 boroughs, 30 townships, and 2 home rule municipalities. I think that has went up because we're home rule and now Braddock is as well. Each municipality has its own elected officials, their own mayor, council, sometimes commissioners or supervisors, police, fire, public works, and some municipalities like McKeesport have their own municipal authorities that provide water, sewer, and transit. So the county is structured in a very confusing manner. So you vote by where you live at. So if you live in Penn Hills, then you vote for people who are running in Penn Hills, and then you vote for your state seats. But the people in Pittsburgh, like, they're not our elected officials if you don't live there. If your address doesn't say Pittsburgh, PA, those are not your elected officials that you go vote for. So for people who are incarcerated or have colorful backgrounds, as my friend Terry Minor Spencer says, you can vote. So in Pennsylvania, people charged or convicted of a felony who have served their jail terms and are not currently incarcerated may register and vote. Pre-trial detainees, so people who are incarcerated while awaiting trial on charge of a misdemeanor or felony charge may also register to vote. People who are incarcerated for or were ever convicted of a misdemeanor can register to vote. People on probation who are released on parole, including those in halfway houses, whether they have been charged with a misdemeanor or felony, may also register to vote. People on house arrest. People are on house arrest for misdemeanor or felony may also register and vote. So don't let people tell you if you're in jail waiting trial, I can't vote because I got these convictions. In Pennsylvania, you can actually vote. Groups like the League of Women Voters and BPEP go into the jail to register people to vote. If you go on their website, you can sign up to go volunteer to do that. So if you know someone in jail or yourself or in it, you actually can register to vote, and it is your right. So make sure that you push for that. Thank you. Any audience questions?
Hi, this is I'm Judy Clack. I'm Vice President of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh. And thanks to Pittsburgh Black Pride and the Penn Hills Library for inviting us back again. This was a very good event last year, and we got almost stumper questions, so I'm counting on you, audience, to keep that up. I'm going to start. I was asked to speak on judicial elections, retention elections, what's on your ballot, and closed primaries. I'm going to start with what's on your ballot, and I'll have Molly distribute some handouts, and I'll give some to my peers here at the table, because there's a lot of content, and and here's AJ, and yeah, we can have one. And there's so much content that I wanted you to be able to see it in front of you while I go over it. People say, there's an election this year? Yes, people, there's an election every year and twice a year. And so this year we have a local election, and if you all look at this sheet on this side that says get ready to vote, up at the top, what's on your ballot? Look at all this. Judicial, there are 2 statewide judges up for the Superior Court and Commonwealth Court. There are 8 openings on our county's Court of Common Pleas, and at this moment there are 12 people running for 8 seats. So how do you pick? Well, on the League of Women Voters website, which is noted at the bottom there, lwvpgh.org, we have a video gallery with recorded questions that each of the candidates have answered. So that's one way you can find out information, because you have to pick 8 of 13. Or I guess there's only 12. And there could be more if we get a Green Party or a Libertarian Party candidate could add in August. So there could be more. On who's running it county-wide. And if you're in Allegheny County, there's a sheriff, 6 county council members, and 8 magisterial district judges. The magisterial district judge may or may not be the judge near your home, but about half of them in the county are. In the city of Pittsburgh, as Fawn was mentioning, there's a race for mayor, 4 of the city council people, and 5 of the Pittsburgh school district directors. And that has been very contentious between closing schools and which get closed or not. So that vote is very important. Municipalities are 130 municipalities, which is not only a record in the state of Pennsylvania, I think in the nation, but were you saying Florida has more? There's a city in Florida that has more municipalities? Okay. And then, so there are mayors, borough, and town council members on your ballot. Every school district has at least 4 school board directors. And school board is so important. Issues that I think this audience is concerned about is our LGBTQ issues, the teaching of Black history, DEI, and there will be like 8 candidates on the ballot. They will not have a party designation because they're supposed to be nonpartisan. So to find out who's on first, and we are a nonpartisan organization, so I can't say anything, but you have to do, what I would do is look them up on Facebook and see if they're aligned with a group, because what's been happening is there are 2 groups. There's there'll be 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, but they're all 8 on the ballot, and it'd be hard to know who's who if you happen to lean one way or the other. So it's up to you to do research, because it could impact what's in your library, what's in the curriculum with LGBTQ and African American studies. Retention elections for 3 Supreme Court judges. Now this is mystery meat, people. On our ballot, at the bottom of the ballot, are going to be 3 Supreme Court judge names. You just vote yes or no. They are not competing against anybody. Their party is not listed. And you get to vote yes or no on those candidates. And I'm hoping, I know someone else is going to be talking about the judicial elections, and maybe they can shed more light on you on this. But it makes a big difference, because right now, I think there's a 5-4 split, Democrat, Republican, and the 3 who are running are formerly Democrats that won't show up on the ballot. And there's been a lot of money put in on both sides, whether you vote yes or no. And if they voted no, those people would be out. The governor can appoint somebody for the rest of the year, but then there will be a special election. So who gets retained or not on the Supreme Court in the state of Pennsylvania is going to impact issues that I believe this audience would be concerned about. Next, candidate information. It says at the top here, the League of Women Voters Volunteer Elves try to reach every single candidate who is running for office to get their photo, their bio, and their answers to 3 questions, and we post them on Vote 411. You enter your home address, and your whole ballot comes up, 1 race at a time, and you can read about the candidates before you go vote. And this can help with down ballot races where you might not know, is there even a town council or borough council race this year on the ballot, and you can check that out ahead of time. Registering to vote, information is on this, how to vote by voting by mail. Deadline dates are are listed, and repeating some of what Fawn said. If you go to the polls and they tell you you can't vote, every person is entitled to vote by a provisional ballot. Every person is entitled to vote by a provisional ballot. And they will take that back, and then they will check your record, and if they find out, oh yeah, you are registered, then it will count. So do not leave without voting. The League of Women Voters website, lwvpgh.org, will have a lot of information, again done by volunteer elves, updated all the time with the election and voting information. Now I'm going to go back and see what else I'm supposed to be talking about. Judicial elections. On the back of this paper, we are electing people on all levels of the state judiciary this year. Like starting at the top, Supreme Court, we're not electing anybody, but there will be 3 retention seats at the bottom of your ballot. Superior Court and Commonwealth Court, there's 1 opening for each of those. Court of Common Pleas, we're going to be electing 8 people for our county. And the magisterial district judges, I think the number was 8 again. Yes, 8 magisterial district judges. You can read about the different responsibilities each level of those judges has on this sheet. And then the last thing I was asked to talk about was closed primaries. Sigh. The League of Women Voters has been lobbying for decades to get this system changed. We have a representative in the audience. We do not want closed primaries. In closed primaries, 1/3 of the registered voters in the state of Pennsylvania are disenfranchised because in our state, this law was put through by both Republicans and Democrats. You have to be registered as either a Republican or a Democrat to be able to vote in the primary in the spring. And college kids especially want to say, I'm independent minded. Well, good, but you can't vote in the primary because there's no independent party, and even if there were one, because some have parties named independent in other states, you couldn't vote in the state of Pennsylvania because of that law. So reach out to your elected officials, for example. You voted for it? Okay, you're on the committee, and we want to push it that to allow everybody to have a chance to vote in the primary. There were a lot of people who went to the polls and wanted to vote for mayor in the city of Pittsburgh. And they couldn't because they were a registered independent, and you have to be either a Republican or Democrat to vote in the primary. However, in a primary, you can vote on ballot issues, and there were 3 on the ballot in Pittsburgh in the primary. So you can vote on ballot issues, you can vote on constitutional amendments, you can vote in special elections in the primary. But in the state of Pennsylvania, closed primaries means it is closed to everybody unless you're a Republican or Democrat. So I tell college kids, hold your nose and pick one, Republican or Democrat. At least that way you get to vote twice a year. And if you want, you can switch back at after the primary. You can keep doing that. You can keep flipping your registration back and forth. That's all I was going to say, but I'd like to see if there are any questions on all of that.
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far, why do people want to be independent? What's the perks in that? Why not? Why is it there?
Why would people want to be independent? I would guess they don't want to be affiliated with either political party, that they feel that their stand on issues falls outside of those 2 parties. They don't want to be tied to being labeled a certain way. And we do have a Green Party that's official in the state, and Libertarian, and 2 other bodies that are more official in the state of Pennsylvania. And they all can put forth candidates in August to get approved by the Board of Elections. So there could be more names on your ballot in November, but they don't have primaries. I think you'd have to ask them. I think a lot of people are not happy with what the two parties are doing and want to do something outside, but that would be a good question for the audience. You know, why would people want to be independent? Does anybody have an idea?
I'm independent, just for the reasons that you said, because I don't identify with any party. I don't feel like there's alignment with the issues. So I'm independent for that reason. And then I had a follow-up question. There's no ballot issues this time around. Not so far. But that's why I'm independent, because I don't feel like either party.
So you don't mind being shut out?
No, it's okay. I'll vote in November.
And I just wanted to add something to what Fawn said about Pennsylvania opening up voting to formerly incarcerated people. This includes felons. People think, oh, I was incarcerated for a felon. And it is almost 100% true that if your feet hit the street, you can register and you can vote. If your feet hit the street, you can register and you can vote. The only thing that doesn't follow that is if you were incarcerated for a felony for a voting rights violation, you have to wait an additional 4 years. If you are still in prison for any felony, you cannot register and you cannot vote. If you are in jail for a misdemeanor, you can register and vote by absentee ballot. If you are awaiting trial, you can get a mail-in absentee ballot. And that Fawn also already mentioned that. But a lot of people will go to the recovery walk and they go, I can't vote. Yes, you can. You know, you have served your time. Pennsylvania changed the law some time ago that they can all. Yes, question.
I had a question. I think there was a recent change in the Pennsylvania law. This is very detailed, so you might not know off your head, with regard to incarcerated individuals. If let's say somebody has a misdemeanor and they're incarcerated in a particular county. They register to vote and they're living temporarily at the jail. Do they then vote at their home address or at the prison?
Yeah, this is something that actually the League of Women Voters went to court on, and they register for their home address not where they were incarcerated, because otherwise if there's a huge population in a certain county, and all those people would be voting just in that county, but they register, and that's a recent change that they would register for a mail-in ballot. Absentee ballot from where their home address initially was. Yeah. Any other questions? And then, okay, there'll be questions at the end, and I'll pass it on to Brittany.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Yes, it's okay. My name is Brandy Fisher, and I am with the Alliance for Police Accountability. I'm supposed to be talking about a few things, but what I wanted to jump on, first, the Alliance for Police Accountability is an organization that's focused on reconstructing the criminal legal system and all of its intersections. And when I say intersections, I mean, there's a lot of different things. The criminal legal system is just not someone getting arrested. Once they're arrested and released, sometimes they can't even get housing, right? They can't get employment. And so when I say all the intersections, we advocate for all of those arenas, for those doors that open wide open. But I wanted to touch on, as far as the incarceration, right? Another reason why people are registered and when they're incarcerated and still voting from their home address, and that's a good reason, is when people are in jail, they may not even be convicted, and they're going back home, right, to their neighborhoods. And when you're voting for your living, your quality of life, right? And so not for where they ship you at. And I wanted to touch on that because I wanted to highlight how important local elections are. Every time we talk about voting, especially in the mass media, most of the time we're talking about presidential elections. The only time you really hear about voting a lot is when it's the presidential election, We're still talking about Trump, and he's been in there for how long, right? And so a lot of people tend to think that that's the most important election because it's the most talked about one, right? And so people wait every 4 years to vote. And that is the worst thing you could possibly do besides not voting at all. Because what impacts you every day is your local elections. So when I say local elections, depending on what municipality or township or neighborhood you live in, depends on who your mayor is, right? Depends on who your state representative is, who your council person is. Those are the people, or your school board member, right? Those are the people who are making decisions that's impacting your everyday. So when you're running down the street and you think it's dumb for you to get pulled over for not putting on the turn signal, you think that's the dumbest law ever? Who controls that? Who do you talk to about that? When you think that when you ride through predominantly black or low-income neighborhoods, there's a gazillion potholes. But when you ride in certain areas, there's not. Who do you talk to about that? Or your car gets a flat tire because you hit a pothole, right? That's your everyday life. When you think your child's education is not okay and you want to ship them to another school, and you don't want them to go to the school, you think it's too violent, you think they don't provide proper education, who is in control of that? When you don't think you make enough money, you think minimum wage should be $7.25 still. When you're going to apply for a job, who do you talk to about that? When you come home from jail and everybody's denying you housing and people think you're supposed to get back on your feet and not hit the block, and you can't get a job, who do you talk to about that? Right? So your local elections are your most important elections because those people are making those decisions about what I just talked about. The simple things that you have to deal with every day in life. And so that's what we like to focus on at the Alliance for Police Accountability. We like to talk to people about what is impacting you. And you tell us, what are your struggles, right? Because people are out here struggling. So what are you struggling with? And whatever you're struggling with, you should not have to. And you have the power to do something about it. But we don't know that. We don't have to choose the candidate that they put in front of us. We can choose the candidate that gets put in front of us, right? What we often do are left with who is in front of us, and we don't know any of these people. We don't know anything about them. They're all liars to us. They're saying the same thing. Once they get elected, I don't see them in the hood. So why am I voting? It doesn't impact me. It doesn't help me. It does, and it can if we work the system the way it needs to be worked. But we have to do it together. And that's why I came here today, because politics seems like it's the biggest thing in the world. And before I stepped foot into this work, I never voted in my life. I started this because a young man was beat up by the police who was the same age as my son. And it seemed like the people was gonna get away with it, and I felt enraged about that and scared at the same time. But my mother was a Jehovah's Witness, and Jehovah's Witnesses don't vote. So I grew up never voting. I grew up taught not to vote. Because God is the one that's going to govern. But I got to live here today. I don't know when Jesus come back. So, it's the truth, right? So I got to be here today. And that's why it's important for us to vote, because this impacts our everyday today. And so, in judges, or local elections, in my opinion, and they have a lot of power. And so I really wanted to highlight about judges as well. And I'll circle back to our local elections. When we go to court, there's always somebody that's making the ultimate decision. And the way what happens in court determines on what they allow, whether they let this lawyer play games or not, whether they shut this one down or not, whether they do deals with somebody or not. Judges, once they're elected, stay there for 10 years. 10 years. It is the hardest thing to get a judge off the bench. So usually when they're there, they're there. That's why when Ms. Judy brought up the retentions votes, we never pay attention to retention votes. A lot of people don't even think about retention votes. That's the only time you can get a judge kicked off. You know how many people go to court and they feel like the judge was crooked and they feel like there's nothing they can do about it? We got to write that name down. They coming up for retention, right? We don't have to be forced to deal with anybody or anything that we do not want. Not any laws and not any people. That's over us. We don't have to do it. We choose. And that's what it's about, having people power, right? We choose. We just don't exercise it because we get overwhelmed. Because it seems too big, it seems too much, and I'm trying to eat tomorrow. We get overwhelmed, but it's really not that big. All you gotta do is attach to an organization that can break this down to you in a very plain way so you can see how to work the system so it can work for you.
Right.
And so with the judges, they get 10 years to be there. To me, that's a very important election because you don't get to see them again. And they get to impact people's lives for 10 years and do whatever they want before we figure out who they really are. And so what we're beginning to do is write these names down. We work with the Abolitionist Law Center who does Court Watch, right? We're writing these names down. And we're waiting for them to come up for retention. And when they're on your ballot, we're gonna make sure we let you know. That's why we get people's contact information. Because we wanna send it out to you and say, hey, you gotta go vote this year. I don't care if you never vote because these people are on retention and we need to say no to them. That's how we get them out. And it's just that simple. It's numbers. It's simple math. It's just that simple. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about is why it's important to be engaged. Because I know a lot of people who don't like to vote, who don't want to vote. And one thing our organization is doing right now is we're door knocking neighborhoods. We have certain neighborhoods that we targeted by voting. Neighborhoods that have a lot of people registered to vote, but they don't come out to vote, right? Predominantly black neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, because we're tired. Most of those folks are worried about a gazillion things. They're not watching who's running for office, who's the best person. And I don't believe everybody should have to, right? I believe that these organizations exist to do that work for you, to tell you who is voting, who's up for election, and to set a space for you to talk to those people, right? Nobody should tell you who to vote for, but you should have access to folks who are running for office and ask whatever question you want to ask, whatever it is that you want to ask them, to see if they fit the type of person you think they should be. But I think one of the most important things is you have to know what these people do. Right? Like, if you're voting for the mayor, what does the mayor have the power to do? What does the mayor do? He's over the police most of the time, or she. That's who they are over the police. They govern policing. If you care about policing, you should care about who your mayor is. Right? But we don't always make those connections. And that also helps us, because my other topic was about building political power. And that is key. Building political power means you can run for office. Running for office does not take a degree. That's why we have idiots in office too. But you don't have to be smart. And I think street smarts is the smartest you can be, because when you're talking about lived experience, that's one of our values as an organization. We believe people who have lived experience are the expert. Not the person who went to school and learned it out of a book because they know nothing about living it. You can't be an expert on something you ain't never did. You might be knowledgeable about it, but you definitely can't be an expert. Right? And so if you live through something, you're the best person for me to talk to, for me to learn about that, because you did it. And so you are the best people to talk to politicians, like this wonderful person here, who is very responsive, because I've called your office to get help for people with their licenses. And do you know that when your license is suspended and you can go to your state rep to help figure that out? You don't even know that. People walking around here with suspended licenses, getting tickets, owing $5,000. My license was suspended for 10 years. And I'm not ashamed to say it because it's the system. 10 years. Crazy. But you can get your license to go to your state rep and talk about it. So engage. Don't just register to vote. Go vote. If you don't know who to vote for and you think voting for people is just not going to get you anywhere, not help, call me. I talk to you anytime. Or talk to anybody up here, because it is real, and I used to feel like that too, and that's why I'm very passionate about coming out and talking to people about it, in particular black people, because we just don't believe, when we don't trust people or trust stuff, we stay away from it, right? And we can't trust systems, we kind of stay away from it, and it's the wrong thing. We got to lean in, we got to get in there, and we got to do more, and we have the power to change that.
All right.
This mic is wet as you was spitting. Happy Winners Wednesday, everybody. My name is Ethan Rad, and I'm the Reflective Democracy Associate at One Hood Media, based in Pittsburgh. For those that don't know, One Hood Media, we're tabling over there, Quadir. We're a nonprofit that uses art, education, and social justice, more so cultural organizing, to power the liberation work that we do in our communities. So that looks like events like this. It looks like events like Fridays on Deck coming up in August, where we're just trying to give the kids a third space to exist in with some music and food. It looks like putting balls on for the community to get them civically educated while also getting them tested. It looks like a variety of different things, trying to bring the joy back to this organizing, because you know it's so clearly filled with strife. But I'm here today as a Reflective Democracy Associate to talk a bit about voting in the context of this year, 2025, in the context of the state of Pennsylvania, and in the context of our current anti-LGBTQ legislation that's been put out. So I'm gonna take us on a list. Forgive me for looking down at the screen because there's a lot, and I wanna be a bit exact with some of the wording as you hear it, so you know, we always hear about all the stuff that's happening, anti-LGBTQ legislation, we know about PID, we know about how things are getting scrubbed off the websites, there's buyer erasure, everything, but I wanna get a bit granular. So we know that across all different levels, across the levels that Judy talked about, across the levels federal to state, to county, to city, there's people coming for trans and queer folks. According to the ACLU's Anti-Trans Bill Tracker last year, there were 701 bills introduced across 44 states, with 51 passed. In Pennsylvania specifically, the state Senate passed 2 anti-LGBTQ plus bills. They weren't codified in law, but, right? This year, 953 bills have been introduced across 49 states. Every time I'm doing this work, I say there's a new record every year, so it's always gonna be a new record. The hate's always gonna build. It's expected. 120 have passed, and 186 are being actively considered. So, at the national level, just before I get into the state, just to break down what some of those things look like. There's an executive order that defines sex based on biology. There's an executive order that restricts transgender individuals from using single-sex federally funded facilities. There's an executive order limiting access to gender-affirming care for transgender youth under 19. There's an executive order directing the interpretation of Title IX to prohibit trans girls and women from participating in female sports. There were efforts made in the House to ban the trans youth from sports nationwide and to add anti-LGBTQ plus riders to federal spending bills. There's obviously Project 25, seeking to remove federal non-discrimination protections, exclude trans folks from military, and allow faith-based orgs to discriminate. And of course, across, the intersections of oppression, what have you, aside from just the simple in-the-face legislation, there's obviously the other cross-cutting legislation that does harm us. There's, legislation coming for food safety and security as well. When it comes to Pennsylvania, I don't want to step on your toes, all right, but we know that Pennsylvania is has the third most banned books in the country, out of any state actually, and the majority are, Black and queer books, obviously. A little more context, back in 2022, also, the state Senate passed 3 anti-queer bills in one day. So while not everything is getting put into law, we know that people are putting their best foot forward to make it shake. So when it comes to the anti-trans legislation in Pennsylvania, we have, of course, the anti-trans sports bill, the Stable and Sports Act, SB 9. We have various bills that are striving to, restrict how we educate our youth. There's a bill, obviously there's a youth version of the anti-sports bill, naturally. There are bills that are, calling parents to opt out or require their permission to get sex ed. It barely got the word homosexuality removed from it. They're trying to ban the word homosexuality as well. So again, putting their best foot forward. 2 gender protection bills in schools, this, that, the third. Healthcare restrictions, some bills are targeting access to gender-affirming care, obviously. There's also the Don't Say Gay and Trans proposals, similar to Florida. It's bad. Positively, I do want to, focus on the fact also that there are people that do have a mindset to also protect our queer and trans people. I can't say I'm as hopeful about how they pass, because most of them haven't passed yet, but I do want to describe them because there are people doing the work, and those are the people that we're going to be focusing on in these elections, right? We have the Equality Act, which was reintroduced in April 2025, which aims to prohibit discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. It amends the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and includes these protections in areas like employment, housing, public accommodations, and education. There's even one called the LGBTQ Panic Defense Prohibition Act, which was introduced last month, and it aims to prohibit the use of a victim's sexual orientation or gender identity as a defense to excuse violent crimes. As folks may know, when people of trans experience are often treated violently, one of the cop-outs usually that is used in court is that they did not know about that person's identity. Most people that perpetuate violence to trans people actually know them prior and know their experience. It's about their fear. So that's what this bill addresses. There's the Elder Pride Protection Act, the Transgender Healthcare Access Act, the resolution striving to recognize June as Pride Month, since they're coming for that even now. There are good things that they're trying to bring forth. Going back to Pennsylvania again, because that was a bit more federal. We know that Pennsylvania does not have a comprehensive statewide anti-discrimination set of laws to protect LGBTQ individuals, but I have another plus to look at our city. This past June, we actually, the city council was able to pass a resolution to protect sex workers. In short, I'll get into it a little bit more in detail. So it's a paramount resolution for the safety of sex workers, folks that are often disproportionately members of the LGBTQ plus community because of our multi-hyphenated intersections and oppressions that come from all these different walks of life. So it offers alternative to our arrest and criminal record for consensual acts within Pittsburgh city limits. It differentiates between consensual sex work and human trafficking, and focuses on the latter to actually put pressure on that, which is the real crime. And it acknowledges the lived experience of many sex workers who face financial hardship, lack of housing, and limited access to social services. These are the type of resolutions that dismantle the barriers and bring support and resources to our people. In terms of the problem, because there are good things, but that's just one of the few. We have to understand that our community, our queer community, is almost always going to be targeted first, right? A lot of our people do not vote because these bills come out to harm us specifically. We have a lot of context, some of us are just believe that we are meant to be disenfranchised, you know what I mean? As you said before. But there's often a pushback that I feel like is automatically incorporated to a lot of our lives. And it is not understandable, but it is seen how all of these already heavy weights of life combine with these heavy weights in legislation and make a person not want to come to the polls. But you have to see that there's intention in this cycle. They came for trans folks, and then they segued to abortion. They came for ID markers, and then segued to Black people. It's always a primer to start with the most marginalized person, and then spread out to everybody else while they believe that they're safe. And most of us occupy more than one of those intersections, and we interact with people outside of our most marginalized intersections in our families, and they are the people that they're coming for as well. So when we think about ourselves, we think that this vote doesn't serve me because they hate me. Some people may hate you, but the only person that's going to stand up for you is yourself, because they're going to come for you, and they're going to come for people like you, and then the people that may not be as much like you, but you still love them the same. And then to that point, we're trying to maximize moments like the city council. As I said before, the city of Pittsburgh is one of 137 municipalities in the county. We don't have any resolutions like that on the county level. It was an extremely positive moment. I was happy to be there and see it passed, but throughout all of Pennsylvania, the same thing is happening, and we need to be sure that we are electing those 8 people that are going to actually protect our values, our safety, and our ability to express ourselves. So, as I said before, I sound a little bit negative about it, hate this, ambivalence that, but the tools of the master, as we always say, won't free us, but they can give us a level playing field so we can create the tools to find the liberation that we seek. Again, this year's vote directly impacts the trajectory of legislation concerning our rights and protections. The ability to have pride, to have drag shows, to sue Trump and have our IDs appropriately marked, to use hormones, all of that to protect ourselves are up for grabs. We have to make sure that we're electing folks at every level, the judiciary, the county, the city, the state, beyond just the orange man, to make sure that we're actually putting our minds, our independent thoughts into these political contexts. And I just want to touch on the judges as well, because they do really make or break the rights of our queer people. As we know, the right to marry, the right to live with your partner, to change your ID, all of those are also topics in the air decided by our judges. They come down to the judiciary at different levels. There are lots of different judiciary levels to educate yourself about and see how that they fit in. I'm gonna leave you at that. If you have any questions, let me know. But aside from that, I'm just gonna circle back. Be 18, be a citizen, vote November 4th, register October 20th, and register for your mail-in and your absentee by the 28th of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Hi, everybody. I'm Ray Sidney Smith. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the current president of the Pittsburgh Equality Center. We're formerly known as the GLCC, or the Gay and Lesbian Community Center, for those of you who have been around as long as my gray hair. And so we've been around for 46 years, founded in 1979. We were born out of PERSAT Center, so if anybody knows the PERSAT Center, which is older than us, obviously, since we were born out of it. And we have stood as a support organization for Southwestern Pennsylvania for all of that time. Folks call us with all kinds of questions. They call, text, email, they can fill out our request form, and pretty much whatever they need, we try to get them in touch with the services that they deserve. And so we really try to make sure that as a nonprofit organization, we're a C3 also, that we are supporting and serving the Southwestern LGBTQIA+ population as best as we can. And we're currently located in Shadyside, inside of First United Methodist Church, if anybody knows us over there. And so I'm going to try and be brief with my comments here, just to kind of fill in some of the gaps and give some context to what we're talking about today. I first wanted to start with kind of really the concept of the LGBTQIA+ population and what Ethan was talking about, which is that if you think about the trans community and the non-binary community especially as well, we have a canary in the coal mine issue, right? If we do not make sure that we defend a minority that is under attack, it is just the first of the minorities that they will go after. So if we're not standing on the front lines to defend every single minority, then we are in a world of hurt. So for those of you who may be of the opinion that we can kind of toss aside one of our parts of the coalition and we'll just get by for the next 3.5 years or so, you're sorely mistaken. We really need to become better at being collaborative and coming together around protecting each other. We have a specific problem in the trans and non-binary community, which is that we have ID mismatch, where their gender doesn't match their government ID, and therefore they are either bullied from voting, harassed. There's all kinds of issues at the polls, of course, of just feeling like they can't. So I think that there's a necessity for us to really start thinking about how we help transgender and non-binary folks with that. That could be ID clinics, that could be a number of other ways in which we can help make sure they know what their rights are and make sure that they're empowered to show up at the polls. By my back-of-the-napkin calculation, I could be wrong about this, but just like on my thoughts this morning and doing kind of the calculation, about 50% of transgender and non-binary folks are affected voters here in Pennsylvania. So 1 in 2 folks who identify as trans or non-binary are showing up to the polls affected by these strict voter ID laws. And so we need to take a little bit of of the playbook of what Brandy's talking about and start taking power and saying, how do we go to our elected officials and make a stand and change these laws so that they're more inclusive and they allow a more diverse population to vote. A larger voting base is always going to be better for democracy. The solution to all the ills of democracy is always more democracy, right? And so it's messy, it's difficult, we're all not going to like each other. Some of you are jerks and I know it, some of you are saints and I know it, but you know what, we can all agree that voter rights are good for everybody. So just kind of keep that as a context throughout all of this. I wanted to kind of segue into the fact that we're inside of a library. Libraries are wonderful access to civics. It's a civics access hub in a lot of ways. And at the center, we actually house one of the nation's largest LGBTQ plus lending libraries. We house roughly around 13 or 14,000 books. And we gave away roughly 9,000 of them away to the Pitt Archival Library a few years ago. They were just books that were in a state that needed a little bit more care than we could give them. And so they are now living there in the archival section of Pitt's Archival Library. So we still house that library. It's a lending library. And we're very much of recognition of the fact that being in a state that has as many banned books laws now, we're just trying as best as we can to make sure that we're both attaining, putting into circulation books that are on those banned books list. And in that process, we created a program called Little Queer Libraries. Little Queer Libraries are like those little free libraries you see in people's front lawns, but they're a little bit of social justice built into them. We actually house them with all queer literature that are on the PEN America's banned books list. And so you will see them crop up in areas around Pittsburgh Center, because they can just come to the center and access our library if they can reach it. But for those who are not really near to the center, we're starting to put those little queer libraries out into the public. So if you are a space that can house one, let me know. Happy to get you connected to it. We have 9 left that we can place into queer safe spaces. Next, I wanted to touch just a little bit on the idea of misinformation and digital literacy. So we are in a misinformation and disinformation petri dish with all of the ingredients to really create an environment in which LGBTQ plus people, especially Black and brown LGBTQ plus people, are just really disenfranchised from voting through information. It's information warfare in a lot of ways. And we need to become just better discerning publics. We need to become really aware of the information that's being put out about us, for us, and we need to become really cynical and skeptical in the right ways. And so I think that we need to emphasize education. One thing that the center does, we're about community outreach, community advocacy, and community education. And what we want to really do is we want to really make sure that everybody knows that, when your uncle or aunt sends you that, Facebook clip or whatever it is, that video, you need to be a little bit more conscientious about whether or not that thing they're sending you is real. It could be a fake video, it could be a fake post, it could be a fake website. There are so many aspects of what we see today that are engineered. We're not even anymore talking about corporate media creating a dialogue and a tenor in which Black and brown people are just always perceived poorly, right? Now it's a position where everyday people can just go to ChatGPT and create, content that can color your opinion in the slightest ways to make you vote particular ways. And so I think it's just incumbent upon us all, especially those of us as organizations here on in the front of the room, but everyday people as well, to start arming yourself with the fact that you have to be, you have to have zero trust as it relates to certain things. And then you need to go to organizations you trust and make sure that you're consuming from organizations you trust. And for those folks who are stuck in the cult of personality of particular politicians, I won't name them, but there are real ways in which we can get around that. So I'll just talk a little bit about this because I think it's important for us all to understand. If I tell you that you are wrong, you're not going to listen, right? So I'm not going to ever tell you that you're wrong. What I am going to tell you is my fact-based, my evidence-based opinion. And that's really, really powerful for us all to really take into heart. Because if you go to someone and you really fundamentally disagree with their position, and you know they're wrong because they're watching basically propaganda all day long on whatever screen it is that they listen to, see, however they consume it, it's just not going to change their mind to go up against them head to head. you have to kind of slide in the back door, okay? You've got to go to them and you've got to give them reasons for questioning what they believe. And they don't question what they believe because you make them go into a fear state. You say you're wrong, fear state makes them go into that anger response or that retreat response, right? So think of fight or flight, right? People freeze, fly, or fight. And so we want to basically put them into a state where they can actually be open, be curious. When I teach how to be an ally, how to be an LGBTQ plus ally, I always tell people, always lead with curiosity. Curiosity is always the way. And we can do that really well in our approach to other people if we can say to them, you know what, I don't know what the Black experience is like. I just don't. You know, I'm a white presenting cisgender gay male. But I can tell you this, I will always be curious. I will always be curious. I'll lead with that curiosity. And if I approach other people that way, then I will always be able to elicit from them a sense of curiosity that they will hopefully walk away with. And that curiosity is doubt and their misbeliefs. And so if we can do that as organization leaders, if we can do that as people out in the world, we can really do a lot of good. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. My fourth, before my final thought, is around the idea of the broaden and build theory. We are a population, whether we are individual minorities or multiple minorities, being in that intersectional space between minorities, we experience minority stress. And one thing about voting that we've learned from study after study is that people who vote have less stress, right? It's a remarkable thing, but it comes from the work of Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, the concept of the broaden and build theory. And then study after study has found this to be the case. When we disenfranchise voters, they feel less connected to the body politic. When they feel less a part of that, right? When you feel less part of the community, of course you're going to feel like an outcast, right? Which of course starts to eat away at your ability to do all kinds of other things that the community expects of you, but also what you expect of the community, right? So you're not going to go to your state representative and say, you know what, I've got my license that's been, expired or has been, out of commission for X number of years. I'm just going to fly under the radar and not contribute back to society in this way in which I know will be good for me, right? It's a self-interest that you're actually hurting, not everybody else. But there is a loss, of course, to everyone in the LGBTQ plus community who then ultimately is not contributing to the body politic, that's not contributing to the commons, to the good of the commons, by virtue of feeling like they're disenfranchised. So I really feel like it's incumbent upon us all to think about how we can get more people to vote, right? That's not just voter registration, that's not just showing up to the polls and voting, but that's being engaged civically between elections and being able to talk their family into being engaged in those elections. I honestly wish my parents always voted my way, and I know that they probably don't. At the same time, I want my parents to vote. I want them to vote. I want them to stay curious. I know that as they age, they're going to become more conservative. That's the statistics, right? But I also hope that they know their gay son loves them and that they love me, and that by virtue of me leading with curiosity with them, they're going to change their minds, their hearts and minds over time. And they're going to lead toward what is the right side of history, right? The arc of justice bends toward justice. It doesn't bend the opposite way. Sometimes it wiggles the other way, and we're in one of those moments. I'm just a very optimistic person in that sense. And then I'll close with this, which is that we're obviously in a moment where we have been under attack regarding access to healthcare, and we can tie directly that access to healthcare to our votes. By voting for a particular group of people, they have started to fundamentally try to strip us of access to HIV care, to STI care, to gender-affirming care, and otherwise. Local and judicial elections matter. And when we think about our current state of being, my thoughts are actually one of optimism. I know this you're going to follow me here, right? But my thoughts of optimism are that for many years we saw the queer movement, right, the queer rights movement, LGBTQ plus rights movement, making gains. We made them in the courts. We made them in legislatures, and we all really felt the wind at our back. And now we are up against a new type of threat, a threat that took a long time to get here. We're talking Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich talking on the radio about how they can build a movement that would be able to upturn and overturn a particular kind of politics. And that particular type of politics led to the Freedom Party, it led to the Tea Party, it led to what is now the MAGA movement, it led to what is Trumpism, and I don't even know what that is, okay? So when we think about the trajectory of where we are today, it taught me something in the moment, which is that we can never, ever let our foot off the gas. If we let our foot off the gas, we will always, always know that there's somebody ready to take away our rights. And so if we think about this from that perspective, we also need to know that there is a generation of folks who are going to be hurt today, right? But there is a plan for us to be able to move forward through that. I don't know what it is, but it's up to y'all, right? Y'all are going to have to figure that out. But it will hopefully ignite in a whole generation that message, that we should never, ever lose sight of what's through the windshield in front of us, and that the rearview mirror does not guarantee us what's through the front. And so I think there's a hopeful optimism for us to be able to think through what can we do today to make sure we can stop the spigot of violence, stop the spigot of erosion of rights, but at the same time build our own Project 2028, Project 30, 2030, so that the progressive movement can have rights, can have eudaimonia in queer and intersectional living. We can have that kind of future that we all long for, right? Which is where I and you and everyone around you lives well. We know that it's far more the case that we have more in common than we have apart. And yet we use purity tests. We go, oh my gosh, I don't want to be registered as a Democrat or Republican, so I'm going to lose part of my voting, access by doing so. We do all of this stuff as machinations to basically feel better about ourselves, when in reality we're doing worse off for everyone. So if we can come together, if we can learn that this moment was a learning lesson, was a learning opportunity for us all to get it together, and to really focus on building that kind of power, I think we're in a good state. I think we're in a good place. We're learning the hard lesson, right? We're learning the hard lesson that we took our foot off the gas. Maybe some of us even tapped the brakes because we thought we were better off than other people. And now we can dust off the boots, get up out off the floor and get back to work. And so with that, I will hand it off to KJ.
So I was looking at the registration form, and it does say male, female, non-binary. And then the driver's license has the same options. So you're saying that even someone who checks non-binary are having a problem when they go to vote?
Most people do not have that change in their ID.
Okay, so we have to get this change.
Absolutely, education, right? Most are walking up and showing up to polls. They don't have that paperwork done. And so they're showing up in a circumstance where it's the first time they're going in the polls, they're being asked for ID, and they're being turned away, and they're not filling out provisional ballots. Because we get the ballots.
So they don't have an ID at all?
They're not showing up to the polls with them. Right? Or they're showing up to the polls with an ID that is basically outdated, does not match the gender designation.
I work with polls, I know a lot of us in the room probably work with polls. I've never asked anyone what their gender identity is. They have an ID.
That's fantastic.
I think, because I go to their training every time, I've never heard them say you have to ask in the city of Pittsburgh, or Allegheny County.
We serve the southwestern Pennsylvania, so we get phone calls every election.
Okay.
That someone has been turned away, denied, or they felt scared to show up at polls because they didn't have this.
I think that's the one that we can zoom in on.
It's education. It's absolutely education.
People, like, if their ID is not up to date, right, they might be automatically outing themselves.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying that, like, if their ID is not up to date, they can be automatically, like, outing themselves to a coworker. And, our coworkers are many people, like, what if that's your neighbor or someone you don't necessarily get along with, right? Like,
But that's not required to.
No, it's not, but if someone's showing up and their ID doesn't match, even though.
Doesn't match what? Doesn't match what? What I'm saying is to vote, you don't have to say, I'm this or that.
Correct.
You just have to show an ID.
Yeah, and I'm telling you that there's an education gap.
Okay, that I understand,
But that education gap fits into it, because I'm showing up to the poll, I even have a perception that I'm going to be outed, right?
that's
That's going to stop me from even showing up to the poll. We can narrow that gap, but that's an in-the-community problem that we need to solve for our community.
yeah.
It's no different in my opinion than people who are on rural locations because they feel like they have to show their ID, anything might come up or want to do something. It's just when you're always targeted, and it's hard to understand, like, unless you live it a lot. But when you
are always targeted for a particular reason, it puts a fear and anxiety in you that that's going to continuously happen. Whether it might make sense to someone or not, it just does. You're like, it's the same reason when people are pulled over by the police. People will say, well, why are you scared if you're not doing anything wrong? I'm scared because I'm black. I'm scared because this has happened to a zillion of my friends. I see it on TV, I'm scared because, you know what I mean? And so people can say, if you're not doing anything wrong, why would you be scared? You know? And so people have a fear because of the things that happen to them in their everyday lives. And it causes them anxiety or angst, and especially when people don't want to be out there. That's a whole different scenario, but just on an everyday thing, I know people who have been touched by the carceral system who don't want to go and give their ID to anyone or don't want to go vote. No different than people who are undocumented. It's like people have fears for a lot of different reasons.
So can we go in a different door and like Allegheny County? I think the people that do that training for poll workers, I think they would be open to educating on that end. So the people working with polls are more educated.
Why don't you do that?
But I think that's one of the things that Ray pointed out is he kind of turned some of his comments towards leadership. And I think that's important to embrace because a lot of us are not intersectional in our work and our literature, right? And so we have to be like here listening to these things and learning these things. It's like, how can we make sure that we're a part of this mass education to make sure we're incorporating this in our information that we're spreading?
I was mostly going to speak to I can absolutely imagine where this scenario happens that you're talking about. Beaver County, go into a very rural polling location, and somebody who has identifies with a different gender that is or presents differently than what's on their driver's license. That poll worker, if they are of not a friendly mindset, is going to look at that and say, you're not that person in that picture, and you don't get to vote. And this is the fear. So in Allegheny County, we're probably, as in with most urban core settings, probably okay, although probably still a lot of education that needs to happen. But you get outside of that, you get out into a really red rural place, they're trying to find every excuse to keep anybody from voting. That doesn't look like them, doesn't sound like them, doesn't believe like them, doesn't, whatever. So that's, I absolutely, when you were telling that story, I'm like, oh, yeah. Having lived in a rural community in Wisconsin for many years, yes.
All I want to add to that is just from the POV, thinking about the POV of a person going through that experience. Before all of this stuff, all the ID specific stuff really kicked in even, a lot of the people in my life that are trans experience, what have you, they see themselves still as existing within a legal gray area at all times. It's obviously a lot more clear now that they exist in a legal gray area, if not like a red one. But to live like that, you kind of don't want to be interactive. Would you say the body politic? I love that term. You don't feel drawn to interact with the body politic the same way many of our intersections that we understand maybe a bit more also aren't drawn to. But so that part alone to me just kind of charges that approach of what it means to walk into a polling place. When for many of us, even as we sit, we have to educate over and over again over the most benign parts of it because it is so somehow hard to absorb some parts of the voting process for all of us. That on top of that legal gray area, it's just such a hard barrier to entry without us being like, this is okay.
I have something to chime in too. One is on our table, there are the small cards from Vote Riders. Vote Riders is another organization that helps you will pay for you to get your birth certificate if you don't have documents to vote. They will pay for your birth certificate. They will pay for a voucher for you to ride from your home to Department of Motor Vehicles or to the Social Security office. So they are nonpartisan 501c3 associated with League of Women Voters. They're good guys. But with respect to transitioning people or non-binary people, they will help you explain how do you get your documents changed. And the hardest one is a birth certificate, to get that changed. But it is much easier to get your voter registration sex changed and your driver's license sex changed. And Molly's going around with these cards for vote writers, and they can help you so that your ID will match. And I can see that a transitioning person, the first time they would go to the polls, you would have to show your ID, but after that you do not have to show your ID. And your ID doesn't say anything about your sex, and they shouldn't be asking about that. So
It goes back to the picture doesn't match the person standing in front of you.
Perhaps you could go to the motor vehicles and get a new picture.
You could, but now, again, we're now a cost added on to, you know, and more barriers. All right, I'm gonna down to end.
I just have one. I just want to say one thing. I work the polls. And whenever you go up to the table and you say who you are, you look at the paper and it'll say, must have ID. If it doesn't say that, then you don't need ID. If they tell you you need ID, then you say provisional. That's the key word. Everybody has to remember. Provisional. You are allowed to vote. And everybody, we need to spread that like a virus.
Word of the day.
Yes.
Provisional.
Mm-hmm.
So Ray, he, him, we are preaching to the choir here, okay? So part of my concern in all of these discussions is that we're very much aware of what's going on. But for most people, voting is a chore. It is not the thing you wake up and go to bed sleeping about. I love voting, right? I just love it. It's the most fun, engaging part of being a citizen for me, right? I was raised that way. I have an immigrant mom who worked hard. My grandmother worked very, very hard to make sure my family could live here in the United States and be who I am today. I stand on the shoulder of those women giants, right? They're petite women. I mean, they're Chinese, so they're really small. But I stand on the giants of immigrant families, right, who became citizens. And so I love that. I love the fact that I get to vote. But most people are not thinking that way, right? This is just another thing that has to be added to the list of so many other things they have to do in their world. And so the idea that somehow someone's going to be going through transition, right? Maybe they started out as Michael and now they're Michelle. And they're going to show up to the polls in Beaver or Butler County or Westmoreland and have to point at a piece of paper and now as Michelle say, I was once Michael. I'm telling you, so many people are just not doing it. So that's the education, that's the work we need to do in our community to be able to protect those people because they need a voting buddy. They need some prep talk before they show up to the polls. They need to be told 6 and 9 months beforehand that they're safe, that they're going to be able to vote, right? And this is fun. This is actually enjoyable, that you can actually be a part of society. And when you're excluded from those things growing up, when you're excluded from those things in transition, it makes voting a negative, right? And each one of those associated negative aspects diminishes our power, right? Because that means someone on our side of the aisle is not voting because of it. So that's what I'm like keenly aware of, because we get those phone calls. I talk to those people out there in the outer line counties and down in the borderlands of West Virginia and Ohio, right? They're the ones who are coming to Pittsburgh for Pittsburgh Black Pride and for Pittsburgh Pride and enjoying themselves for that minor moment of protection. But then they go back and they don't feel protected.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to be a Debbie Downer about it.
You know what, I was gonna say real quick, and I don't know the lady's name in the white, but I think she made the most poignant, I think she made the most poignant point where you have to get it done legally. You gotta just, if you're gonna transition, you gotta do the work, do the paperwork, get it done legally, and then you don't have a problem. And then, you blend in with society like everyone else. So I think that's what people, exactly, and I think that's what, because I have a lot of friends that have transitioned, but they, you have to do it legally. You have to go and get the paperwork, pay the money to get your name changed and all of that. So, because with the administration today, they're targeting trans people. So you're going to say, but if you do it legally, they have a harder chance of stopping you from your right.
You shouldn't have to, because it shouldn't be a means of doing it illegally in the first place. But I definitely understand what you mean in the sense that there are ways in which we can try to, you know, build our ability to engage in the civic process. But at the same time, I do want to acknowledge, like, it's not just about blending into society. The idea of, like, not every trans person is thinking about their ID until the ID is of importance, you know? Some people just want to exist and live their lives.
Yeah, and
Some
I
people,
agree with that, but see, that's where, like, the doctors, because, you know, when you're transitioning, you're normally under medical care. That's where they have to work with people as well and say, hey, you know, as you go through this transition, let's start doing your paperwork. So that you don't have this problem. So you can go through TSA without a problem. So you could go and vote without a problem. So I think it's, you know, it's a collective thing, because once again, when you make a choice to do something outside the norm, you have to know what you're doing. You have to do the research, find out, you know, what do I need to do so that I don't have this problem. So I think it works on both sides. You have to educate yourself. You know, no different than, you know, most black fathers are telling their sons, this is how you have to, you know, you have to act whenever you get pulled over from the police. Because if you don't, you may be dead. So it's just one of those things you have to educate the, you know, and do the work. Because transitioning is hard. You know, it's emotional, it's mental, and then, you know, you have to deal with, you know, getting clocked everywhere you go and all that. So you have to just do the work. And then, you know, if you have an ID, like most of my friends that are transitioned, they have female IDs. So, you know, they just live their life like a female. But they did the work, you know, where you have to do the paperwork. And it's expensive. It's not cheap, you know, to always get it done as well.
I appreciate your thoughts, and I wanted to broaden this to another point. I think I made it early on in my key points, but I think it's important for us all to know that we can work with legislators, we can work with you know, our executive you know, office branches of government to create laws that help reduce the necessity for that kind of administration, so that people can come out of transition and not have to be burdened by all of this administration. There can be ways that we can use technology, we can use education, we can use the system as it's designed to be able to reduce some of that administration so that we can do that. So I think that's again, for us here and those of you who are out there doing community work, that leadership is in moving the laws to a greater you know, kind of perspective so that we're able to have laws that just help make that stuff easier. There should be no reason why people can't show up to vote and not just be able to breeze through the process. And I think there are ways in which I think we can do this, but it's just going to require some innovative thinking with regard to the current legislation out there.
Yeah, we have to get to the point where we can vote online.
Right.
That's what we have to get to. We get to the point where you can vote online. You can do your taxes online, so why can't I vote online?
Well, not, yeah, unless you're using you know, one of the lobbying services out there.
Yeah.
Other question? Do you want to make another comment? Oh, okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
We know I have tons of questions, but one other question I was going to ask you all is, as you all, as part of the organization, what are you all doing to keep the funding? Because I know, to my understanding, if you know, you do your grants, if you put anything in there for, you know, gay, LGBT, trans, they're going to throw it out. They're not going to fund it with this administration. So are you finding that's true, or
it depends on your funding sources, right?
Okay.
So we're not seeking out, nor do we receive any federal funding. That's a purposeful choice on the part of the center. Right. You know, we're not scabs. We don't cross the picket line, right? So even in the case of the Post-Gazette still on strike, we don't answer those reporters. So we have certain principles that the center abides by, and one of them is that we want our federal government to know that we're not going to take money from them if they're not going to see our people, right? So we are going to seek grants and funders who are going to be aligned with our mission and services. So we haven't had a problem in that regard. I know that there are other organizations that have been receiving those funds, and they are going to be in for a world of hurt. And that's just, you know, just victims of circumstance. But just from our perspective, we have and like I said, we've been around since 1979, so we have large and small donors and fundraising events, and then small and large grants, and all of those are a mix of things that fit our mission and organizations that are going to be aligned with us. That was a ditto. That was a ditto. That ditto. There we go.
You just have to have a lucky camera.
Good question.
Yeah, this question is, it's to something a bit different about what you're talking about. There's, all the municipalities in PA, in Allegheny County, and like the challenges that occurs when that exists when moving around, like, different industries you work, the sectors that you're working in. Like, 100 years ago, Allegheny was merged into Pittsburgh, right? You know what I mean? You go to the south side, Warrenton is called Warrenton because there already wasn't Washington Avenue. Other cities have annexed larger parts of the city, and become bigger and become all the way out to the county. How would the work that y'all do in greater Pittsburgh, if it was just, Pittsburgh all the way out to Allegheny County? And what other coalitions would rise? You know what I mean? What would be different? Who would be thinking by this?
Okay. So for League of Women Voters, our name is now League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh, but I think maybe we should do a name change. It really is League of Women Voters of Allegheny County. We are not just the city of Pittsburgh whatsoever. We feel we have to cover all 130 municipalities and 43 school boards. I do not understand why there are 130 municipalities. I think it is because each community doesn't want to give up what their autonomy. We would be in support of all these communities, binding together or all becoming have the borders of Pittsburgh are small. The population of the city of Pittsburgh is small because it doesn't count the other 129 municipalities. So maybe we should do a name change because we are League of Women Voters of Allegheny County. What Greater Pittsburgh to me meant, it's the whole area, so we care about every community in the county. But I don't know that that answers your question.
Well, I'm asking, what would be the difference in the work that y'all do?
We're doing our work will drastically change. And I think kind of for the better. One of the most difficult things that we face is there might be 130 something municipalities, but there's 200 and something police departments. Because there's school police, university police, high school police, right? There's all these different police departments. And even with the different municipalities within Allegheny County, there's different police departments and they all have different policies. Just like school districts do, right? So we're doing work and we're trying to change the discipline policy of a school district. It would be nice if once we did this once, it was just across the board. When we go into policing and we're like, oh, this is the best practice and we know these are the best policies, it would be nice if it would be across the board. And it would be nice also for citizens who are trying to exercise their rights to know that the policy doesn't change when I cross the street, right? When I leave Homewood into Wilkinsburg, I'm leaving a different municipality, different mayor, different police department, 5 steps. That's difficult and confusing to even enforce accountability because you have to continuously learn policies over and over again, depending on which area you're in, right? So once you learn Penn Hill's policies and their practices, it doesn't mean when somebody calls you over in Braddock, it's gonna be the same. And so if it did, it would be a lot easier to do our work, but I think that's by design, right? Because one of the things that we've been trying to do is regionalize police departments. And they had to do it because we shut East Pittsburgh Police Department down after Antoine Rose was murdered. But there's no more of an East Pittsburgh Police Department. So now there's 4 police departments under one, which is Braddock, North Braddock, East Pittsburgh, and I'm missing one. But they're all one. Was that one?
Is it Forest Hills?
No, here we go. Rankin, there it is, Rankin. Thank you, going, brother. It's Rankin. And so now they're all one police department. And they're like within a small area of each other. And tax base matters, right? When you're talking about housing, right? If Allegheny County if it was just all one county, you wouldn't have the city of Pittsburgh tax base, and then this school over here in Wilkesburg closing and not having enough money. A lot of things would change. A lot of things that we fight for and fight against would really change. You agree, Joe?
It would change a lot.
Yeah, so it should be pushing it. I had to ask a politician in the room.
I think briefly, our mission would not change. We service all of southwestern Pennsylvania. Yeah. So we service southwestern Pennsylvania, so we're seeing a much larger swath of land, and so we're going, out there to many different, many more prides than most other organizations. We go to lots of those prides, festivals, and I will say that we are also part of the Pennsylvania Coalition of LGBTQ+ organizations, and one of the things that we are very conscious of is that if you leave Allegheny County, you lose rights. You leave and you head into other counties. You can be fired for being gay. You can be you can lose a lease for being transgender and have no recourse. Absolutely. And so we're really trying to push for HB 300, that expansion of the civil rights law here in the in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to basically give full legitimacy to LGBTQ+ citizens. Right? We're red-blooded citizens like anybody else, and so we deserve all the rights that every other Pennsylvanian affords. So our work is already expansive in that regard, working with the other organizations in the state for those kinds of state-based rights issues, but also just because of the regionality of Pittsburgh. We see people coming over the border from Ohio. We see people coming over the border from West Virginia. We see people coming from Kentucky and Tennessee up here to have the protections that Pittsburgh affords them and Allegheny affords them. So we have that kind of draw. So we're already seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that coalition-wise, voting-wise would be really different as well, right? Like a lot of, like the city of Pittsburgh population, this is a person who's grown in the census, but from the last census to this census, I think it was like a black family a day was leaving in the city, but the county was mostly the change, right? It didn't change it as much as drastic. So there was so much displacement that just went to the Long Valley. I wish that, volunteer to talk about that, but how that changes. And you know what I mean? If the whole city was, the whole county, Pittsburgh would be like in the top 10 population as well. You know what I mean? So I just don't know what the, like you're saying, there would be so much legislative shit, but it's just why that hasn't happened and what that actually will mean for the region as a whole. I think it's just a really fascinating thing. It's imaginary.
When we were working with regionalizing that small area, people are losing jobs. There were 4 mayors, not as one. But you know what I mean? So people fight against it because they're losing jobs. You're not going to have as many people employed in a lot of different areas when you're making this one thing. So money kind of rules everything, and that's one of the main reasons people fight against it, right? So now you're pushing even police officers. You're not going to need as many, right? You're going to have one chief. You're going to have so all of that changes, and people fight against that.
I just had one more informational thing to say, and I had to look it up on my phone. When I think you were talking about the importance of judges and retention elections. And some of you came in later and don't have this, but come pick up one. I looked it up. There are retention elections for all the statewide judges, and I knew that. I didn't know this. So Supreme Court, Superior Court, and Commonwealth Court do have retention, but locally, Commonwealth Court is retention elections. And there aren't, I don't know for sure. I don't know if there's anybody up for retention on the ballot this year in in Common Pleas. In Common Pleas, but if there is, it sounds like, warning, check out who they are. Do you want to retain them or not? For our magisterial district judges, they just have 6-year terms, and they have to run for election again. So your magisterial district judge, they're 6 years and then they run again. But everybody else, you're right, all the way on up to the top, are retention elections. So pay attention, and as you said, you keep a list of people who've been naughty and don't retain them.
And nice.
And I shouldn't say naughty because I had to be nonpartisan. And nice. What other questions? You said you had a bunch of questions.
No. I mean, just in general things, what's going on with the administration today? Not so much about voting, but just things that's going on with the administration is so sad. So that's and it's going to get worse. We're 6-7 months in, so it's going to get worse, and that's the sad thing about it. But I'm glad to hear that the center is not having issues with grants, because I know a lot of organizations, they're having issues with grants right now. So that's really great to hear.
I'm not. I'll stop there. I just wanted to thank you all so much for this. I wanted to pass the mic over to Representative Joe McAndrew, since he's here.
I think they definitely deserve a larger round of applause than that. Please, thank you. I'm not going to stand up here and give a terribly long speech or anything. I think we had a long discussion here today, and I think it was very valuable. I appreciate everybody who had the time to sit and talk and be engaged in today's conversation. I specifically, though, want to call out a couple of things because I think it's important. I think it's important, particularly to note how fragile our protections are in Pennsylvania at the current moment. So overall, I think one of the things that we pointed out earlier on was that in those boxes on those, whether you're applying for a ballot or registering for a ballot, or if you're looking at your ID, that says male, female, or non-binary. The only reason that is the situation is because the administration, PennDOT, and the governor's office allows that to be an option. That wasn't legislatively given. If we have a Republican governor, it's not partisan. If we had a governor or a Supreme Court that would decide to go the other way on that type of initiative, we would lose the ability to have those on our licenses. Particularly, I want to get into the fact that the current administration has really been pushing down, whether it's through the White House or through the Supreme Court that has the appointments necessary to do what they want to do. These initiatives where they are really trying to push for more or less what they call states' rights initiatives. And so they're pushing a lot of things into the state, specifically, for the states to roll on. And the reason they're doing so is because they know that they have the ability to, allegedly, in my personal opinion, clear up everything that's not, that there would be entities that could potentially spend money to influence those elections on higher levels and then result in having the states do their bidding to what the degree that they want to limit protections and freedoms that we have. In the state of Pennsylvania specifically, we are in a space where we have a governor, a legislature, and a divided legislature. We have a House that is controlled by one party by one singular vote, and a Senate that's controlled by another party by 3 Senate votes. That being said, I was very proud whenever I first got elected to be the tie-breaking vote for the side for the House that then allowed us to have who we have in the House today. Our Speaker Joanna McClinton and the leadership that we have seen from the House over the policy that we've seen. Specifically, I think a couple of things that we noted today that I think is very valuable. One is that yes, I voted out of committee actually last session to allow for independent voting, independence to vote in primaries. Whenever that bill went to the House floor, it was more or less loaded up with voter ID. It was loaded up with abilities to limit the mail-in voting. It was loaded up with a lot of garbage that they were trying to get in return, quote unquote, for having the ability to have independence vote in primaries. And that was the side of the aisle, or one of the chambers. I'm not going to get into that because this is a nonpartisan event. Decided that they would like to get into. At the same point, if we're talking about LGBTQ protections and what we're seeing in those battles right now, what we're specifically seeing is a Senate that earlier this year, the only thing that they voted on that was, in my opinion, in my opinion, that was really what they wanted to in terms of their substance of what they wanted to see in Pennsylvania was the Save the Women's Sports Act. And they voted that bill, every single Republican in the Senate and 5 Democrats voted for the Save the Women's Sports Act in Pennsylvania. Now in the House, we're over here, we've not brought it to the floor, we don't plan on bringing it to the floor. They tried, the Republicans, their representatives on a certain side of the aisle that filed a motion to try pushing this out of committee very recently, 2 weeks ago. And they got enough signatures, and they're trying to move it around. And there was a procedural move that moved the bill from one committee to a different committee that would cause the situation to kind of cool down. But at the same point, they're now running ads against my colleague. They're special interest groups running ads against my Democratic colleagues, quote unquote, saying that these people voted. I have pictures, you can see them. They're ads right now running against in more rural Democratic districts, that these individuals voted to allow men to play in girls' sports. Not boys, not kids, no, men. They're saying that on purpose to manipulate voters, and they're saying that to target a marginalized community. Now, I appreciate the opportunity to stand up here, or sit up here and speak as, cis white male, is straight, but I try to be an ally in the space. Tries hard to be an ally in the space, to have these conversations with people on the ground. But the reality is that what we're seeing right now is, more or less a sparse ring tonight. And we're seeing people that don't understand what the Supreme Court races mean in November. What the court races mean in November. Now, we had a great discussion today on what that means. But at the end of the day, we know in Allegheny County that, at least on the side of the aisle that I support, 75,000 people who applied for mail-in ballots last year have not applied for them again this year. 75,000 in Allegheny County. So my call to action tonight, after kind of laying out the groundwork, which is truly what is going on in our state and the dynamics in our state, my call to action tonight is that if you want to see, the protections continue for our minority groups, you want to see protections continue to grow and expand to allow our administration to give the ability for people to identify as they want to identify, well then, I would go around to anybody who who hasn't applied for a mail-in ballot yet, who applied previously, and get them to apply immediately for their mail-in ballots. Immediately. Anybody you can. That conversation needs to happen. If it's kid at college, if it's, your family member that might not regularly vote, anybody you can. One of the best weapons that we have in Allegheny County is our ability to produce mail-in voters. And we are seeing a downtick in that. And maybe it's only because it's July. Maybe it's because it's a nice day out. Maybe it's because people don't realize what really is at stake because we are protected here in Pennsylvania. And they don't realize how fragile that protection truly is. But anything you can do to get somebody to engage the vote, and if they don't want to go to the poll because they're worried about being outed or whatever, have them apply the vote by now. Get people engaged now, and get them to get them involved, because what's going to happen in the fall is there's going to be millions and millions and millions of dollars spent to have a no retention vote against this current Supreme Court that is protecting you currently. So, anyways, thank you. Sorry to put it down 10 minutes, but I hope I called action at the end of this story.
Thank you for that push for mail-in ballots, and it's easy. Like if they're already registered to vote, they can just go online and apply for a mail-in ballot online. If they're not previously registered to vote, they can do it all online. We have lots of paper forms here. This explains the mail-in voting process. I think that's an excellent idea. If anybody transitioning, just apply for a mail-in ballot. And it comes to your house. I didn't want to do it because I like going in, I like getting the sticker. And there's the new stickers that kids created this year. But if you do the mail-in ballot and you get it several weeks ahead of time, you look at the ballot, you think, oh my God, I didn't even know these people were on the ballot, and I'm in League of Women Voters. I didn't even know that there was this race there, or you might not have known about the retention. Then you just do your research and then you fill in your bubbles. So it's, I'm finding it very helpful, but I don't get my sticker.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of people that come in to vote, they really don't know everybody that's on the ballot. They don't know these people. But if you do the mail-in ballot, you have the opportunity and the time to research, which is very good.
On that note, I mean, I showed up to the ballot and there was an initiative on there, and the confusion of the question, I had to sit there for a good 5 minutes, we'll stand there, for a good 5 minutes to remember what I planned to vote, because it's like, wait a second, it's a yes or no on this. They are meant to confuse you. And so really doing that kind of research and getting that mail-in ballot means that you have potentially an opportunity, because they could change, right, between that and that. But, really do your research, because you don't want to show up and just start willy-nilly saying yes or no to some of these ballot initiatives, because they have real impact, real harms that they can cause by voting the wrong way on them, and they are purposefully meant to confuse us.
Well, and they are purposely misleading because they're horribly worded. As someone that's new to Pittsburgh, I've just been here a few years, to just the way they were worded, I was like, one, because they reference a section of the charter, which I'm like, do I even know what that is? Like, how would I know that if I didn't? I was like, what? So yeah, so that's weird. But yeah, I love the mail-in ballot. I'm a big fan. Although I'm with you, I don't use it myself because I'm an old school. I like to go into my polling location, thank my poll workers, cast my ballot, and put my sticker on. And I get a lollipop at my polling station. So what are you gonna do? But it is an incredibly helpful thing, and I will also